You know what? I'm fed up with public transport. I'm using it since 10 years and it's going so bad. Very expensive tickets, very dirty, disgusting, always late. Off. I'm buying a new car. See you and stop using public transport.
Mohammed, wait. There are alternatives. We can do it differently. I'll tell you all about it.
Sure? Oh,
We can make it free, man.
Okay.
We can make it work.
we can give it
Chill
one
out.
shot.
Chill out. It's gonna be fine.
Free public transport. Could it be beneficial for our cities? I mean, honestly speaking, what do you know about free public transport? Probably you have heard about a couple of cities that have implemented this concept, but you know what? There is many content out there where people basically without research are bashing this concept, claiming they're not efficient, neither economically viable. Well, is that true? In this episode, we are going to interview and debunk the myth of free public transport with urban geographer and academic researcher at the Free University of Brussels, Wojciech Keblowski, and he has done extensive studies about free public transport, and believe us, he has a lot of insights that will trigger your attention. You're watching Stripping Architecture, and in this episode, we're going to strip the architecture of our cities and reveal the potential of free public transport. Stay tuned.
So, tell us about yourself.
I'm Wojciech Keblowski. I'm an assistant professor at VUB here in Brussels. I specialize in public transport and especially in free public transport. That's something I've researched in the past 10 years. So, yeah, happy to talk about it today.
Interesting. So, first question. Is public transport is a public space?
It can be. I think it depends. If you look at the station right here, for example, with the gates, I mean, immediately when you have this kind of infrastructure that sorts users, that only allows certain people in and other people are out. I mean, obviously, publicness is conditional, right? So you need to have a ticket to enter, you need to have money to have this ticket, or you are a lucky one and the ticket is paid for free by your employer or by the state, and then, well, you can enter as much as you want, but it's not for everyone, clearly.
So, why do we call it even public transport if it's not accessible for everybody?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, in theory, it is a public space and a public service because it's paid by the taxpayer. We all pay for public transport in Brussels if we pay taxes here. But then for some strange reason, and that's something that I've looked at for the past years, and I mean, it's really a complicated issue. We pay for public transport at the moment when we pay taxes, and also we pay for it the moment we actually enter it. So we pay twice, actually, which is very different from, for example, libraries or healthcare. I mean, okay, we pay a little bit for healthcare as well, but this is really a tiny fragment of what it actually costs to run. Every time we enter a public park, every time we use street lighting, for example, this is already covered. We pay the taxes, it works in the whole city. Whether we go to, I don't know, different neighborhood or not, it works. There is kind of a threshold, a basic minimum service, and it's guaranteed that street lighting, libraries, public parks, all this works. Whether we use it on a daily basis or not, whether we go to a neighborhood where basically it works in the whole city, whether we go to that all parts of the city or not. This is kind of a basic social contract that we agree on, and at the moment of usage we don't pay. This is already done. So for some strange reason, with public transport it's different. So we have to swipe the card, we have to pay, and there are serious inequalities in terms of who pays and how much, and that's very, very problematic here in Brussels, I think.
Honestly, for me, like, first time I landed in Belgium, I heard, they have free public transport. You get in, and you see the gates, and you say, it's a bit tricky. But this brings us to the question of during the welfare state in Belgium, let's focus. They had like free access to education, free health, free kind of affordable housing, but never free public transport.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the kind of the tricky thing or very perverse thing about Belgium or Brussels is that free public transport does exist. Exists for some people who, of course, are on the downside of the advantage, so people who are, I don't know, unemployed or poor or whatever, officially poor, because a lot of people who are really poor, they don't have this status. You have to declare yourself poor, which is problematic in of itself. But also quite a lot of rich people, pensioners who have very high pensions in the 70s or 80s, who receive 3,000-4,000 euro a month, they get it for free. people who have, like myself, a middle class, full-time salary. If I choose to have free public transport ticket in Brussels, I can. And I'm honestly the last person who needs it. I can definitely pay for it if I really need to. And it's the people who are in between, people who are working in the gig economy, people who are working on projects, who are independent, students who recently graduated, who haven't found yet a good job, but they are not unemployed either. People who are poor, but they think they are not. They pay the full price, they probably cannot afford the monthly ticket because now it's at least 55 euros, 66 or even more. They definitely cannot afford to buy the annual ticket because who has 500 euro lying on their bank account if you just graduated from your master degree? So what they do is they buy 10 ride tickets. And of course, this is expensive. It's 18 euro or even a little bit more now with the recent price increase. So what they do is, of course, they evade. They calculate, they try to figure out, okay, which trip do you need to really pay for? Which one can you maybe slip through, open the gates, or use the gates that are open? So these people are, okay, it's very easy to criticize them. They are not contributing, they may be even stealing, although I don't think this is theft really. But yeah, I mean, it's super expensive to use public transport in Brussels.
So if we understand well, that's why they have installed gates in a way.
Oh yeah, the gates. I mean, officially, there are a couple of reasons why the gates exist. So one is, I mean, in Brussels and beyond, the idea of having tickets is double. One is to create a financial revenue. So there is this idea, this dogma that you need to have the contribution for the passenger for the system to work, which I think is a myth. I don't remember the latest figures, it changes year on year, but more or less StEAP makes 1/3 of the operational budget, so the money that they need for energy costs, personnel costs, for just daily management, running of the system, this comes from the passenger. The rest comes from a subsidy from the state. So if you pay the ticket, yeah, okay, this is an important contribution, but actually we are not the ones who make the system run. The investment, so buying new vehicles, putting a new tram line, let alone like the metro, is of course a ridiculously expensive proposition. So none of this comes from the passenger. All this comes from a subsidy from the state. So, but still there is this idea in the transport industry that without the contribution of the passenger, financially the network will not operate, which I think is very controversial and not really true. And the second one is of course disciplining passengers. So regulating the flows, making sure that you can close a station, open a station, regulate how many people pass through or don't. And another thing of course related to the discipline is that you can count the passengers. So StEAP claims that these gates not only allow for maintaining the revenue, so making sure that everybody pays, taps in, taps out, but also that you count and you also have an idea of place of origin and place of destination. But we know very well that there are alternative ways of measuring this. And you actually don't need all this data, and also we don't really know what the relevant authorities, Bruxelles Mobilité and StEAP, what do they actually do with this data? So there's also the trap of generating an enormous amount of data, but there is very little evidence, or actually no evidence, that they use this data to inform policy. The best example is Metro 3. So we know very well that people don't need the Metro 3, but still they will be built. So regardless of all this data that is being generated from tickets, policy does not really follow. They make policy not based on evidence or data, but based on, well, on politicians, or politics, no?
So gates, back to the gates, we call them sometimes like racist or exclusive because I personally, we witnessed multiple times, rush hour or not rush hour, for a lot of people, you know, with kids or elderly people or children, they are excluded. They have to queue. Yeah? It's like the gates doesn't work. It's what's the point? Like even you make people's life complicated. You have traffic like with people queuing to get in out of there. So what's the what beside the stats? But they don't do the videos, or the people who put the gates, they never use the metro maybe.
That's a very good question. I mean, I don't want to get personal about like engineers who design the metro, but we have a pretty good idea that the geography of the place of residence of engineers that plan metro system in Brussels is rather restricted. So a lot of the stations these people who design metro probably never visit, if they actually travel on public transport. But I mean, personal arguments aside, the gates are, well, on paper, on theory, they work the same for every passenger. The problem is that any city, and especially Brussels, is an extremely diverse city. So a passenger is not a homogeneous figure or a person. It's multiple types of people, and this constantly evolves over time. We are different people. Our bodies are different, our genders are different, our class, our ethnicity, our linguistic capacity, cognitive capacity, the way in which we decode what's going on here in the station. You and I, we speak French, Dutch, we can read, we can write, our bodies are more or less, you know, normative. I mean, for me, crossing this gate is peanuts. I swipe my card and I go through. But indeed, the moment you are a person who cannot really, for whom this is the very first time on the metro, or who come from some rural place in Maghreb or in Eastern Europe, this is a very new experience, and it's absolutely not clear what to do here. The moment you are taking care of somebody who's elderly or a kid, you have a pram or whatever, this becomes a completely different game. And we also know very well, we've done research on this actually, that these gates very often break down. They don't work properly. The amount of times we did observations in the metro stations, looking especially at these double gates that you and I know very well, the amount of times that they don't work, where you have to swipe the ticket twice, or you are blocked in, you have to go back, you have multiple kids with whom you cannot navigate this properly. When you have shopping bags, when you have a pram, I already mentioned, wheelchair and all this. There's also excellent research that has recently come out, which shows how even if this infrastructure is theoretically adapted in some stations, but definitely not all, to people who have some physical disability, in practice this infrastructure does not work. So these people are even more excluded from the metro. And any kind of gating or restricting space in what's supposed to be public transport, you asked about that, makes the space immediately much less public. So it's much less, I mean, you enter the station, the first thing you see is gates. I mean, that's really not inviting.
You're not welcome. Yeah.
No. I mean, clearly the idea here is that you have to do something to be allowed to enter. And the moment you put price on this, and the price is the same for every user, and as I mentioned earlier, it's actually inverted. The richer you are in Brussels, the less you pay. Because if you have a middle class salary, this is completely for free. It's really ridiculous. And we know the amount of people in Brussels who have no papers, it's very hard estimates, but about 100,000 people in the city don't have official documents. So they're immediately out of this welfare system. They have to pay the full price every time they travel.
Even they have like a very strange, let's say percentage-wise, if you drive a car and you like cross red light or you park, you get like, I don't know, 50 euros or 80 maximum. But if you get into the metro without paying, you get the first fine 100, second 200. It's absurd. Like, what do you think about it? How you will convince people to leave cars and use public transport if you punish them that hard? Like,
totally agree. This is something that makes me really mad. So I don't remember again the latest figures. We can check that later. I think the first parking fine is around 35 euro. Yeah. Depends on the municipality, maybe. It doesn't matter. It's much less than the fine for not having a ticket, which I think is 105. Then it doubles to 110, and then there are some serious legal consequences. Like you can really have a lot of trouble with the law. I mean, seriously, even if you assume, and I don't agree with that this is theft, that entering this as a poor person who doesn't have money, I'm stealing from the state, whatever. Okay, let's agree on that for a moment. Who am I harming by doing this? If I speed in public space in Brussels in an SUV, I can kill somebody, I can hurt somebody, this has serious impact on people's lives. And I mean, to value this less than not having a ticket in public transport is absolutely ridiculous. It's bonkers. I mean, the fact that you pay less for parking and for speeding than for not having a ticket in public transport, it's a political choice. It basically means, okay, if you park not so well, or if you speed, everybody has done it, so just don't do this again and let's forget about it. Well, I'm sorry, but I really think that this should be much more punitive. I'm not in favor of being, really hard on the law and everything, but I think this actually is dangerous. Not having a ticket in public transport is not dangerous to anybody. I mean,
same applies for annual abonnement, like or prescription. For the metro, I think it's 650 or whatever. For a car, to register in the municipality, 25 euros.
Very good point.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. No, totally. I mean, we clearly live in a society, this is not just a Brussels thing or a Belgian thing, where having a car and not using it properly, using it actually against the law, is much more socially acceptable, politically acceptable. Financially, this is less, punished than doing the right thing, which is using public transport. That's more expensive than having a car in Brussels, I think, long term. And also, not using it properly, meaning not paying for it. It costs you more, and the consequences are more serious than not using the car well, which I think is way more dangerous for society, for human beings. I mean, you can really hurt somebody.
So back to your research, especially on free public transport.
Sure.
Maybe we, stripping architecture, we have an issue like politicians. Maybe the word free sounds like scary. If you tackle it in let's say if you come up with a new terminology, is it gonna be less harsh on politicians, or people will accept it more, or it will not change that much?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not into I don't know how to market policies or good ideas. Maybe we need a different name. The thing is that, I mean, okay, it's not free, and lots of people attack it. Like, it's not free because somebody pays. There's no free lunch in America. All these kind of super neoliberal arguments, like nothing is free. Well, I'm sorry, but we have free education, free healthcare, free public parks, free libraries. We do have this tradition still in Europe. Let's see what happens in the next years and decades of free goods, free services. That, of course, I mean, somebody pays. Who pays? We pay because we pay to the state, and the state maintains these services, and that's the agreement. That's what we like, as opposed, for example, I don't know, in the US or in some other parts of the world where you pay ridiculous amounts of money for absolutely everything you do because that's what they kind of agree on. I don't know if this is really what they choose, but fair enough. So I think some goods are free or some services are free. You can call it zero fare, you can call it, I don't know. What I don't agree with is this idea, I mean, that's often put against free public transport, the social fare. Actually, Steve uses this concept, and they have this social fare. So if you are really in need, we will give you a free ticket. The problem with that is immediate. You have to identify a huge amount of always evolving, very diverse groups of people who are worthy of this ticket. So people who have low income, people who are elderly, people who are young, people who are unemployed. And it's basically the state chasing ever-evolving social reality of people who are in some kind of a poverty situation, or they need this kind of help. Which, if you look at how little money is actually made on the passenger, what is much easier to do is basically cut all through this red tape, give it completely free to absolutely everybody, and basically assume that this, as public parks, libraries, healthcare, etc., this is a public service for everybody to use freely. This is what we want people to do. And this is good for the environment, it's good for society, it brings people together, allows you to have the right to the city, to go everywhere you want in Brussels, to, I don't know, pick up a job, go to school, meet your friends, enjoy yourself, discover the city. I mean, imagine this was free. Imagine you can go anywhere you want in Brussels. And I mean, having a car, using the car would be actually super expensive or difficult, but instead we give you this, and it works, and it runs on time, and it's clean, and I don't know.
We conducted 2 conspiracy theory about not adopting this free whatever public transport. There are 2 theories. Like the first one is the car lobby, it's too strong in Belgium. The second one actually, we thought of if you open the gates and let it for free, the public transport system will collapse because it will not be able to carry on the 10,000s of Brussels every day. We think that.
Yeah.
So it's a way of pushing people out of the system, not to use the public transport too many, to keep the system functioning in a way, maybe.
I've heard this argument, I love responding to it. So this idea that if you make it free, there will be too many passengers. I think there's some kind of internal contradiction here, and don't blame you for that. I've heard this so many times. So on the one hand, the idea of sustainable mobility is we want people to use public transport. If we reduce the price to zero, there will be too many people using public transport. So, I mean, in a way, it sounds like we want people to use public transport, but only a specific type of people, or people who pay, people who are also this middle class kind of sanitized version of the passenger who is a commuter, a passenger who knows how to behave in these spaces, who is disciplined. And some other types of passengers, well, we want to keep them a little bit out of public transport because they might be, I don't know, not fitting this kind of middle class idea of what public transport is. A former CEO of StA&x, who later became the head of International Union of Public Transport, once said that the ticket is like a fence around the house that prevents the rubbish from being thrown into the garden of the house. He also, in the same interview, he said that he lobbied for using leather seats or installing leather seats in trams in Brussels to make them like Mercedes of a tram. I mean, this is an idea of a middle-class product for people who value it, appreciate it, and keeping the trash. I don't know what the trash is. Is it non-middle-class users? Or who do you mean? But we can argue with this idea or not. The problem is that Brussels is not a middle-class city. Brussels is a working-class city with a middle-class population as well. It's a very diverse place. So what do you do with people who are poor, who are not literate, who are excluded, who are vulnerable on many different levels? I mean, isn't this a service for them? They do not have a car. Often they cannot cycle or they cannot store a bicycle at home because they don't have the conditions for that. So if they had the bicycle, they would have to park it outside, which means that probably sooner or later it will be stolen. So these people are doing the right thing. They're taking public transport. Why don't you want to embrace them, make it easy for them, make it free? And going back to the question of overdemand, or too high demand, of course, if we made public transport completely free in Brussels for everybody, we would need a very strong political commitment to increase the frequency, to probably, I don't know if we would need to buy new vehicles, contract more personnel, probably. In metro, that's probably doable without many infrastructural improvements and changes, but on surface public transport, of course, that means we would have to take much more space for public transport away from, surprise, surprise, the car. And for that to happen, we really need to invest in public transport. I mean, invest not financially, but politically. So take physical space from the car to public transport. Do we want to do this?
But this brings us back to politicians. You have the new progressive politicians, the ecological whatever, who quit their car, but we do argue they take direct the bike, electrical cargo, backfeeds, whatever. And I think those guys skip the public transport. Maybe they never, we cross a lot of Brussels politicians on the bike or in the car, but never in public transport. Is it a coincidence or not? So, because if you don't have politicians or people in offices using this means of transport every day, they will never know what we are talking about. Gates, late, whatever, all these problems. So, is this reality or just...
I don't know. I mean, maybe. I think what I'm much more bothered by in Brussels is that in theory, we live in, 2025 now. We passed almost a quarter of the 21st century, and the 70s are always in the rearview mirror. But then to every serious mobility question in Brussels, we go back to solutions that were actually conceived in the 60s and 70s, which is, let's build a new tunnel. With fixed stations that are completely not flexible. We learned absolutely nothing from the pandemic in terms of what it does to any distribution of any viral infections, which might happen in the future. We invest huge amounts of money into infrastructure, which all mobility studies show we really don't need. And the rest, tram lines, bus lines, we will kind of get by. We will add a line or two here and there. We will do a little bit of cycling infrastructure also to kind of show that, yes, we're doing some things. But we will not really deal seriously with the presence of the car. I mean, I think free public transport in itself, of course, is not like a solution that covers all these problems, and it's not a magic wand, baguette magique, whatever. But it is a provocation, I think. It really is a kind of a stake that pokes the wound. If we really had to do this, we would have to really reimagine the city and reimagine its transport completely, in a sense that, going back to your question about what would happen with so many passengers using it and where would we actually put them, we would really have to redesign the transport system of the whole city. We would really have to make it very difficult and very shameful almost to use the car, and make public transport an absolutely common option for everybody. Make public transport go everywhere, go fast, go often. And I mean, you don't get there by building a metro line, you get there by building a lot of tram lines on the surface, doing buses that are really separate from traffic. To make cars stuck in traffic and buses, fly through the space. And this has been done in many places elsewhere. We know how to do this even in this city. There are good cases as well in Brussels. So I really don't think it's an infrastructural problem. I don't think it's a financial problem or a social problem, because I think there's a lot of support for these kind of ideas in Brussels. It's a political problem.
So, two things, let's wrap it up now. Do you think it's realistic to have, we should rethink this free, we don't like it, whatever, proper free public transport? And is there kind of an open debate, or politicians has invited you or other experts to kind of take ideas, is it possible or not? Or it's just completely ignored, they perceive it as a left radical alternative?
I think in Belgium right now, the only political party or political actor that is kind of considering is PTB-PvdA, who were considering it, I think, in the last election on the national level. So they were thinking of making trains also free, which I think is actually a very interesting idea as well. Although, the magnitude, the scale, complications, very different. I think within the authorities in Brussels, but probably it's even much more radical. Yeah, I think it's more radical in Flanders. There is a very strong taboo against zeroing fares, against making tickets disappear. And it goes back to what I mentioned earlier. So this idea that if we get this revenue out, the financial structure of the network will be shaken.
Which is not true.
Which is not true, I think. And also this disciplining factor. There is a lot of fear if we remove the gates, if we remove the tickets. to use this metaphor, I think the city will come to public transport. If the city is diverse, if it's poor, if some people are indeed very vulnerable, they don't fit the paradigm of a middle class consumer who always has a ticket, noise cancellation headphones, the latest iPhone, and they work on the metro. I mean, some people do, but this is not Brussels. I mean, Brussels is also a person who doesn't know how to read, who doesn't have the papers, who unfortunately sleeps, sometimes rough in public space. These people also have rights. And I mean, you have to open the network to the diversity that the city is. It's a public service, it's for everybody. The same that if you go to a hospital, you should also be, received. If you go to a library, everybody should be able to use it.
We have an idea. What about the gentrifying, like public transport or hipsterization of, to make it more cool and accessible? You generate money and fuck it, these tickets will be like dissolved by bringing new people who can pay, or gentrifiers, or like a big promoter.
I mean, I don't know about hipsterizing it, but gentrifying it, or rather like making it as a commodity that you really, you pay as you go and you pay for the actual value of your trip. I mean, take a train 2 hours from Brussels, go to London. I think this is very close to reality, where Transport for London claims, at least before the pandemic, they were very proud that they were making quite a lot of money from the passengers, so proportionally they would make much more than Brussels. But the price, I mean, if you use the tube or bus in London, it's extremely expensive. The idea really is that, it's a commodity, everybody has to contribute, nothing is for free, no free lunch in America, blah, blah, blah. I'm not sure this is really the reality or the city that I would like to travel in or live in.
So, what if we take this liberal capitalist idea of redeveloping the stations, the empty stations, which are the majority, and creating new businesses or like activities run by the people of Brussels who will profit from it, and the profit goes to the stations and to the society?
I don't know. I mean, maybe there is an idea there. I mean, what's quite clear is that public transport hubs have a very strong potential. I mean, there is a lot of value in this. There's a lot of potential to promote social or economic activities. I think you need a good policy there. You need to have a good idea of what do you want to happen in public transport hubs? How do you want to harness their potential? I mean, my thinking about this is that you can really put some public services there, for example, I don't know, childcare facilities, libraries indeed, so that you can really allow people to trip chain, to kind of to facilitate, to incentivize the use of public transport. I mean, if you want to bring your kid to school, you don't need to actually go to school. The school is at the station, or a daycare center, or whatever, or you can drop your book or whatever, or pick something up, or indeed go to a shop. And if some of these services are profit generating and they are owned by StB or whatever other entity that is public, that then generates revenue that is reinserted into the network, why not? But I mean, I have another idea. What if we actually use the money from the fines of the cars, speeding, parking tickets, we have the low emission zone, and we absolutely guarantee that this money does not go back to car infrastructure to further incentivize the same problem we are trying to curb, but it goes directly to public transport. I mean, you can create much more revenue. Another one, I mean, that's like an elephant in the room, Have you ever heard of company cars? How much this costs the taxpayer? And we know
400,000.
Yeah, I mean, 90% of the users of these cars are middle-class men with high salaries and managerial positions. I mean, it's really it's a ridiculous policy which costs money, and if we use this money to, again, incentivize public transport, it would work much better. Going back to the question of space and how you use the public transport hubs, I mean, of course there is this already established strategy of transit or transport-oriented development. It works in many, many cities, countries around the world. It's a bit controversial in the sense that it allows public authorities to use the centrality of the transport hubs to speculate on land, to create new neighborhoods, new centralities. But that takes us to another elephant in the room, which is the production of housing, which is hardly existent here. The region is producing housing for middle-class consumers, but not for the working class. But you could imagine that there is a shift in policy, and we really build public transport. And around public transport, we build housing. We build neighborhoods which are accessible, which include high percentage of social housing, which is hardly produced in Brussels. And public transport is the spine of this. That really, it is this kind of system that allows to connect all these different uses, functions, spaces in the city. Why not? But again, we go back to the realization that the problem is neither economic, nor social, nor spatial. The problem is political. We need different political strategy. We need different vision. I don't know who has it. I hope that there are people who do have it, but I mean, I don't think they're currently in the government.
Luckily the gate was open so the kids run quickly, otherwise they will spend like 20 minutes and they will lose multiple metros, whatever.
I also love this, this kind of all sauce of steep. I don't know if we can capture that. Like, there is this kind of...
Yeah, we can explore one station.
Maybe I'm a little bit triggered by the visual identity of steep. Here, this is maybe not so clear, but they have this kind of new design since a couple of years ago, and there are a lot of posters which show the users of the metro, which are mostly white, middle-class, young people. But also this kind of a gentle reminder, some rules apply. I mean, who are you kidding? Like, we are in Brussels. This city is full of very different people. And I think the visual identity of the public transport company, the way that they communicate with the user, again, they talk to them as a consumer, they talk to them as a customer, they don't talk to them as a citizen, as a person, or as a very diverse, very heterogeneous amalgam of people.
Honestly, because if you pay such high tickets and the stations are so unorganized and the delay, okay, not pitching, don't expect citizens to get engaged. Like, they don't feel like it's my station or my, like, I have to take care of it. Or like, you are here like just passing by, and some people avoid some stations because there is like hatred start to grow up against stations, which is scary. Like, you're traumatizing people. Like,
there's a lot that can be said about the public's quality of these spaces. I mean, that they are exclusive, like in visual terms, that their communication with the passenger is problematic. The fact that they are treated as consumers and clients rather than citizens. But I mean, okay, what I hear a lot from my female friends is that the level of security or the experience of women in these, especially metro stations, it's horrendous. I mean, the way that the space is designed or was designed in, I don't know, 60s, 70s, 80s, with a lot of dark corners, corridors that you don't really see the end of, lighting. This space is not inviting, to say the least. I think it really can be dangerous. I mean, we are in a station which is, well, probably one of the most, roughest, I don't know how to call it.
It's not that, it's
I mean,
just,
there is
ignored, I would say.
There is a lot of drug consumption here, which, of course, you can say that this is a problem of the station. I think the problem, of course, is drug consumption in Brussels, the fact that there are so many people who are addicted to drugs and very little policy to address this.
But there is this discrimination in stations also in Brussels. You have fancy stations like Louise, Namsa, Port Namur, or Tron, where is the Eurocrat and the people. There's clean, proper, constant maintenance. Here you go up down to the working class districts. I don't know, like, they spend zero money on like the little effort. And I pay the same ticket as the guy in Louisa. Why should not having a proper station? Properly in a design way and or like different activity. This is also mind blowing. Like,
I think it's true.
That's why it's like makes me thinking. No, I'm buying a car, bro. You didn't convince me yet.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. I mean, I'm not sure it's as simple as like the working class, the croissant pauvre stations are worse than the ones in like Woluwe or Oudergem or whatever. Although I think there is something there. The stations in the eastern part of the city, I think, are a little bit better maintained. And I don't think this is a question of the public that uses them. I think it's a question of commitment of the authorities.
Of course. On top of that, they use the new metro wagons or like these. Running on the rich neighborhoods after, and they dump the old ones here.
Have you ever been to the Clemenceau station, for example, the one at the abattoir market?
Yeah.
For me, this is like a great example of somebody designing a station without having ever been to the market. Like Monday to Friday, it probably works, but Friday to Sunday, they have to do one directional entry because there's so many people. The station is just way too small. It's like it really needs a massive station, but they build a tiny one. Whatever. But.
So I don't know. This giving the people like the feeling that. Yeah, we do care about all stations same. No, it's not the reality, which makes you thinking, why is this like, this is like takes us again. They want maybe less people to use metro. That's it,
I don't know if they want to, I mean, I don't think they want people to be discouraged from using the metro. I think it's just knowing or somehow assuming that a lot of people use public transport no matter what. You don't have to incentivize it, you have to promote it. These people depend on public transport. They do not cycle, they do not have a car, they use public transport no matter what. So the policy does not work for these people. They're already doing the right thing. Let's instead focus on a middle-class white guy, to simplify this of course, who has the car, and let's attract these people to the metro. So we're gonna now, or public transport in general. And I mean, okay, nothing wrong with attracting people who use the car to the public transport. But what about the people who already are using public transport, who are vulnerable, who are poor, who are often, because of their gender, class, ethnicity, race, body type, they don't have alternatives. They have to use the metro, tram, bus. They're doing the right thing. Why doesn't the policy embrace them? I think one of the best policies to embrace them is free public transport.
Ali, so we keep the optimism and it will happen.
So don't buy
at
the
some
car.
point.
Please don't buy the car. Sense.
I will give it a second thought.
Okay.
We will have another session to convince me because it's
Okay.
still.
Let's do this. Let's do this.
Ali, cheers.
Well, there you go. We hope that you liked this video. There was a lot of insights and a lot of data, and honestly speaking, we ourselves, we have learned a lot. And as always, we would like to wrap up this video with one of our reflection sketches. As you can see on the illustration, we have imagined a metro subway car, and from this subway car there's different buildings popping out. What is interesting that there is one door being wide open. From this door you can see some liquid that is similar to the egg yolk that's like spilling out of these doors. With this illustration, in a fun way, we would like to make a personification that the metro and the subway and the public transport in general has very strong hidden potential of life. We just need to crack it open and let that life emerge with the public space. In other words, what we can extract as a very important point from this interview is that if we want to make public transport free, it doesn't mean just opening the gates. No, it means completely redesigning and reshaping the cities as we know them, recognizing the public network of transport as a source of life and publicness. Just imagine if citizens could own the real estate within certain radius of the public transport stations and they can be operated by the public transport companies. Then these revenues can be reintegrated in the public transport system. More so, what if these public transport stations, instead of being hollow and empty and abandoned, we fill them in with functions that will serve to the welfare system. In that way, we can actually make polycentric cities and stimulate equal distribution of investment in the city. Just think about it. This solution, this idea that we are giving, has a lot of potential and it should be regarded as such. However, so far it looks like that our cities are still very conservative and politicians do not want to take this step further, and they are acting in a service of preventing the status quo and defending the strong profit-making lobbies. We'll talk about it some other time. However, so far we think that we delivered some value, some solutions and some interesting insights. Please support our work, go on Patreon, become our supporter just like these beautiful people over here. Follow the next videos that we are proposing to you, subscribe, share, comment and spread the good word. See you till the next episode. Bye bye.